this tilted. For a year, looking at that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone's doing well tonight. This is the Public Service Subcommittee, and we are doing interviews tonight. I would like to maybe do some housekeeping first for those people in the audience. What we're going to do is we're going to do the tax collector position first, and we have two people that have applied, and we're going to interview. And we also have a third person that we're going to interview for the planning board. It just timing fit perfectly for this. Then after that, so that should take us to close to 7 o'clock, then we're going to do the city auditor position, to which we have 3 people for that. So and then I think it's only appropriate and fair, so when we're doing the interviews, so any person that's applying for the tax collector that's not being interviewed, maybe just wait in the hallway. So having said that, we do have a quorum. To my right, we have Josie Valentine. To my left, we have Howard Graney. We also have Peter Tallman, Joe McGivern, and David Bartley in attendance. And let's go. I make a motion. We call this meeting to order.
So moved.
All in favor?
Second.
The ayes have it. The first person we have is Catherine Jakowski. Please come in. I'm sorry? Yeah, I don't think we have any. Yeah. I thought I just went over that, David. So what we're going to do, as you've been through this before, is we, the City Council, will ask you any questions. But prior to that, you can just give a brief overview of who you are, what you're doing, what you've done, and that sort of thing. And then we'll ask you questions, and we'll follow up if you have any questions, and we can go from there.
Okay.
So I turn the floor over. Just make sure the green light is on your microphone.
It is.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome.
State your name and your address.
Sure. Catherine Jakowski, 198 Allen Street, Holyoke, Mass.
And if you want to just give a brief overview of why you want this position.
Sure.
And that sort of thing.
Yep. I've been working with the city, started in the treasurer's office 5 years ago. I also, for a brief few months, was acting auditor and applied for that position. I most recently was assistant treasurer, and when the current tax collector resigned, there was a space that needed to be filled. I volunteered my services in an acting position again, so I'm currently the acting tax collector. And I've just found that I really enjoy the work that I've been taking on and doing in that role, so I was interested in applying for the permanent position because I think I've created a solid working environment with the 2 employees that I have down there, and I think that while the previous tax collector did a lot to improve the office, there's still room to grow, and I have some ideas that I'd like to move the office forward with.
Okay. If I could start, what are your thoughts on combining the offices?
Space-wise, or like physically going through the process of merging and making it?
Probably physical, you know, the actual, or actually both, if you want to
Sure.
go in detail.
Well, I mean, currently we did move down, so we're right next to the treasurer's office, which I've noticed has been kind of helpful for most constituents that are coming in, especially people coming in for permitting, and you know, they need sign-off. So we've worked it between the offices, where if one constituent comes in on one side and needs the sign-off, we then take their paperwork over to the treasurer's, or vice versa, and do the sign-off, so they don't have to travel in between both offices. And I think that's been well received. There's a lot of cross-functionality between the two offices, so I do think there's advantages and disadvantages to physically merging as well. Logistically, obviously, that didn't really get voted to work out in the last election, but I think it makes sense, or at the very least to the point where the treasurer kind of oversees everything, and you know, we work with them.
Okay, so having said that, in the interim, we had two other councilors join us. We had Glass Lebron-Martinez and also Council President Kevin Jourdain. Would anybody on this committee first like to ask questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Graney?
Catherine, just briefly, I noticed on your resume that you are really involved in civic activities. Would you relate to us a little bit about you know, those civic activities and the city of Holyoke in general?
Sure. I've always kind of volunteered at the Holyoke Merry-Go-Round. I love it down there, and I grew up with it, so it's kind of I think it's a great part of the city, and I like to get involved with different things like that. I also volunteer, and I'm on the Youth Softball League board, which I've always loved softball, and it's kind of nice, a great way to get involved with the youth in our city and make sure that they have positive things to be doing, and helping them grow as people. It's been a really nice thing to get involved with. What else do I do? I also, within the treasurer's office, was able to work with Career Point over the past summer to help them, kind of guide them with their program in employing youth during the summer, which was very rewarding. It's nice to get involved in that aspect as well.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Katie. Hi. Okay. For some reason, the little thing is not here, so hopefully it's not making some weird noise. So I'm pulling up your resume here, and as you mentioned, and as we know, you were the acting city auditor for a couple of months in 2014. Just out of curiosity, why tax collector and not the auditor position, which is also open?
Well, I went through the process of applying for the auditor's position, and obviously the council decided I lacked management experience, which was understandable. After doing that job for a certain amount of time, as much as I enjoyed it, it was a lot more to take on than I had originally anticipated, but learned a lot and just felt that I was better off and more needed back in the treasurer's office, which was why I switched back there. And just the auditor, we've had an acting auditor. He's been doing a phenomenal job. I've been working with him, so I didn't really see that. The tax collector, I don't say that I initially wanted as soon as it was available, but because it opened up and they had a need, I just filled it interim and realized that I really enjoyed the work that was going on in that office, and thought that I could really apply my skills and knowledge to help it move forward, or at least keep going at where David was able to bring it up to. Yeah.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question, in terms of the role of the tax collector and the, you know, kind of when the public comes in, right, a lot, you know, they're usually not happy to see the tax collector because they're, you know, leaving their money here. What are your thoughts in terms of just kind of the role of this office in terms of the community and the welcoming environment or not that office has or has not had in the past? Just kind of in general, what are your thoughts on that, and what do you think you would bring to that?
Yep. Obviously, as you said, you know, it's a tax collecting office. Nobody's really happy to be there. but my goal is to, even if previously maybe perhaps people find that the office was rude, or not necessarily, I find that both my staff members that deal with the front desk are very competent, and I'm working with them to kind of appease. You have to just listen to everyone that comes in. Everybody has a sob story, everybody has something, but also to create an environment where everything's consistent. So if somebody comes in and they have a certain case and you say, no, I can't waive something, or any of those sort of things, it has to be consistent across the board. I'm not going to make exceptions for one person and not another. Trying to stick within the law, obviously, but do the best I can to train my front staff to make the process a little bit easier and more pleasant for those constituents that are coming in and are already upset. Obviously, there's connection issues, so we're trying anything that we can do where you need access to both treasurer and collector, trying to make that a simpler process so they're not traveling so much, so that can appease them. It's a little bit frustrating right now with motor vehicle people. If they have things that they need to bring to the assessor's office because they need an abatement on a parcel or their property, obviously we try to make that as easy as possible, but physically they have to go upstairs. But we're trying really hard to be able to pick up the phones more, obviously, and initiating lockbox has really helped with that, because now my staff members aren't constantly overwhelmed with mail coming in trying to process that. They can focus on the front counter and answering the phones, which is hopefully helping to increase that.
Thank you. And I'm glad to hear the lockbox is working.
Gladys?
Good evening, Ms. Joukowsky. Thank you for coming out for this interview. I just want to do a disclaimer before we start. She also mentioned that she managed the YouthWorks grant that is actually administered by CareerPoint, but it's also assigned to the city, which then is decided by the Regional Employment Board through them to direct it to CareerPoint. But I do want to say that while she managed this grant last year, we had the best relations in a sense of my data when it comes to the youth wages to come out clean and clear as best as I wanted to. So we made it even. We spent the money down to what it was necessary. So I just want to do the disclaimer just if in case I cannot participate in the process in this one. But just to say that I did work with Ms. Joukowsky, and the relationship was very well done with us. Thank you.
Councilor McGivern?
Thank you, Councilor Leahy. And Katie, welcome once again. And just for the record, your qualifications, between your education, your talents, and the way you performed all your duties in a number of positions in the city of Holyoke, as far as I'm concerned, go far beyond both positions that we're interviewing for this evening. You've chosen a tax collector, and the one I know you've been doing it, temporarily helping out. But one of the areas in the past that we've had problems with is and we're not sure if it's the handling of cash, the accountability of the cash that's handled, and it's kind of scary, when the amount of money that comes through the office windows, so to speak, on a daily basis. Can you touch base on any safeguards that are in place, or any new safeguards you have or will put in place?
Sure. Actually, the previous tax collector did a good job of covering that up, I believe, because he instituted each employee that works at the front desk now has their own cash box. They're locked. We deal with the safe. They have to cash out every day and balance. And then it comes directly to me. I bring it directly to the bank. One thing that I've done is tried to, previously they would wait until the following morning to bring the money to the bank. They just leave it in the safe overnight. Right now what I'm trying to do is the cash that comes in for that day immediately get to the bank that afternoon, so that it's right in the bank, right in the account. You can earn interest if it's in an interest earning account, and not sitting in the safe where things can go wrong. And obviously with the new space, we have locked doors, an alarm, everything that's necessary. Another big aspect of that is that there was somewhat of a lack of detailed reconciliations that were happening, and I've been closely working with the outside auditors to deal with all those issues that were mentioned in any management report from our outside audits to try and get those up to date and keep on top of the reconciliations on a daily basis so that it's not an issue.
Thank you.
We have Councilor Graney.
Yes, just quickly, Ms. Jakowski, I called the tax collector's office last week, the week before, because I received my excise tax bill, which is everybody's favorite tax. And I was wondering why the tax bill was exactly the same as it was last year. And I was given a very courteous, succinct response that the tax bill on the excise tax after 5 years is consistent and will stay that way regardless of the age of the car. So I thought that your office handled it very well, and I was very pleased with the response that I got.
Thank you.
Time to buy a new car, Howie. All right, Councilor Tallman.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for coming down and applying the position and looking through your resume. You're very well qualified for this position. Just got a couple quick questions that I have. What was your has been your greatest challenge in the last couple of years working for the city?
Oh, that's a good question. Learning everything. I've bounced around from office to office at this point, so there was a lot to learn and a lot to take in. So it was certainly a challenge, especially being in the acting auditor's position, because there's a lot that goes into that job, and I was there for hours and hours after work hours, just trying to wrap my head around everything. Yeah, that was probably my biggest challenge, just learning everything. But I think that I was able to do it quickly and sufficiently, and especially in this position, I actually have a good working relationship with the Springfield collector treasurer, and he's been a huge asset, as well as working with Tony, the assessor, closely. He's been a very big help in learning these roles and picking that up quickly. Okay, thank you. A couple more quick questions. What you talked earlier about some things that have been changed in the tax collector's office with the new collector. Do you see any room still for improvement, and what would they be in that office? Sure. I think there's always room for improvement. There's different fees that I'd like to look at to see if, we do a lot of reprinting of bills or a lot of research for outside collection companies, and if there's fees, something that we could tack on as a fee for that sort of research, that might be something that I'm trying to look into. I've also started talking to DPW, Bill Fuqua, to try and see if we can upgrade our ticket printing options to make it electronic, which would save my office time in entering those tickets into our online system, as well as taking out the room for error with she can't read a certain person's handwriting on a handwritten ticket, so then now we can't collect on that ticket because it wasn't entered right, it wasn't the right information. So that's something both Bill and I are looking into to see whether the cost to do it would balance out. Okay, one more question, and it might be a tough one. Do you have enough employees in your office right now? Right now, yes. With the lockbox has made a world of a difference, and we also did hire that floating clerk, which is supposed to work between the assessors, treasurers, and collectors, which has been nice. She's trained to work when my office. So, for instance, today Debbie was out; she was over on our side. So there's still 2 people out front, and it's been working out just fine. Okay, thank you. Since the last time, we have Jennifer Shatnoff and also Councilor Bresnahan in attendance as well. Next up, we have Councilor Bresnahan and Councilor Jordan.
Hey, thanks for coming down. I just had a couple kind of like, questions that I say with love in my heart. As you know, the previous tax collector has left. It was kind of not a happy way he left. We didn't want to go, that sort of thing. So I guess because you're appointed by the city councilor, right, and there's questions to, as the city charter is written, is like who has the day-to-day, who watches the day-to-day operations, are you showing up to work, that type of thing. And obviously, I might have missed it, but there seems to be a lockbox already in the office. Yep. Right, which was very much kind of pushing by the mayor, which that's fine. I have no issue with that, so to speak. But I guess when it starts to get a little difficult maybe in this position, because you're appointed by the city council, yet you work day to day with the mayor's office. I mean, do you think you're going to have the ability to realize that, what Dave Guzman stood up and said, I need more help. The lockbox isn't a good idea. We're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars. you know, the mayor and him had issues with that, and, you know, we invited them both in, and Dave was good enough to come in, and Dave was certainly qualified for the job. I'm just wondering how, you know, that being able to, have you dealt with a situation that's uncomfortable when you're dealing with, you know, basically in one aspect of things, you folks are peers. You know, the mayor really is not your boss. We are your boss. Right. Although we meet weekly or bi-weekly, and, you know, we're not on the day-to-day operations. I guess it's kind of a question and a statement saying, like, you know, can you handle the fact that, you know, Room 1 doesn't really have the authority over you as the city council does, and, you know, we've already, seems like the office has already gotten a lockbox. I mean, there was questions among the city councilors whether or not that payment for a lockbox is better. And I know this is a long question statement, and I apologize for that. And do you, is the shared clerk that you're sharing the same one that is going into the City Hall annex? That's with the building department, the health department? No. Okay. So that's a good answer. Thank you. So I guess my question is basically, you know, do you have the prowess, so to speak, to stand up to the mayor and say, you know what, that's not going to work for the city of Holyoke. I'm going to have to disagree with you, and then have the courage to come to us and say, this is what the mayor's proposing. As a tax collector for the city of Holyoke, with a certainly qualified tax collector for the city of Holyoke, are you going to stand up to him and say, you know what, that's not a good idea, and then have the courage to come to us and say, this is what the mayor wants, this is why it isn't going to work. I need your support as a city council, as the appointing authority for this position, to help me through this type of scene.
Absolutely. I completely understand that it's a council appointment. Obviously, you know, you guys are in charge. Most importantly, the tax collector is responsible to the city of Holyoke, the constituents. So anything that comes in that the mayor's idea might be, that's not going to be beneficial for the city or the constituents that are coming in to pay taxes, and I'm not comfortable with, I would absolutely approach him and explain that to him, and then come to you guys to let you know what's going on for certain. I'm not going to do anything that's not going to be beneficial to the city. I don't believe in that, and there's strict laws and guidelines to most things anyways.
One last question. Just so now, just for the record and stuff, you're making it clear to the city council that that position that was budgeted for the tax collector's office, that full-time position, you're telling us that you can run that office without that. And I mean, this isn't a trick question. I'm saying, tell us now, right? That's what I mean. I want to support that office. I want to see it succeed. But if you're telling us now that that lockbox is going to be taking the position of a full-time, someone in that office full-time.
It's been working right now. I think that we functionally can handle it. Down the road, maybe having a part-time person might be helpful, but we absolutely don't need a third full-time person.
Okay. So there's you, there's Debbie, and
Yuritsa.
Okay. Ritz is the only one that speaks Spanish, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm all done.
Thank you, Councilor. We have Councilor President Jordan.
Katie, welcome. First I wanted to just say thank you for your already many years of service to the city. We really appreciate it, and you've done a great job in any of the different tasks that have been put in front of you. A couple questions. I wanted to just reflect on, one, why the tax collector position is independent of the mayor's office. That's for a reason. The way that the founding fathers of the city set this up was to have the auditor, the assessors, and the tax collector independent of the mayor, so that we have the chief executive function, but we also have the financial oversight and review of the city independent of the chief executive. This is very, very important to the city, and it's very important that we maintain that independence, and that's why this is under the jurisdiction of the Holyoke City Council. A couple things I wanted to just ask you about, and just please respond. David, who was the tax collector, by all accounts did a fantastic job. I can only speak to what I can see and what others in this room I'm sure saw. I mean, he was in the position for 5 years. He was adamantly opposed to the lockbox. He said he could not run this office on a shoestring staff of just 2 other people, due to the fact if anybody takes a vacation, you're immediately left with 1 person, and this floating person is operating also out of the assessor's office. The assessors have stated to us that there is a conflict of interest between having someone both being in the assessor's office as well as the tax collector's office. And one of the concerns is that since you've already become the acting, lockbox is great, 2 staff is just fine, and the office, the mayor wanted that moved downstairs. Immediately that has been moved, no conversation, no discussion here. You're theoretically our department head. Although you're acting by his appointment on the interim, there's been no conversation or communication with us at all. In fact, I filed an order to actually stimulate some conversation because we always had the authority over the assignment of offices. And out of good faith, I gave that to the mayor. And I supported that, and so did this council. And so immediately, as soon as you've become the acting, lockbox is great, we only need 2 staff, totally reversed the former tax collector who's been there for 5 years, and we've moved the office from first floor down to the ground level, and we haven't even had a conversation of is that good or bad, or maybe it's fine. Surely it is. But could you just touch on that the communication is what I'm concerned about is going forward, and it's not so much a concern, but just want to open up that conversation to see what did you see that the guy who had been there for 5 years said, absolutely, I couldn't do it.
I think when I came in at that point, it was clear that we weren't getting that third person, and to put out the motor vehicle excise bills that were just coming out, there was no way that we were going to be able to handle that with just those 2 people and all that mail coming into the office. It wasn't going to get processed. When I came in, there was already a backlog of mail from the real estate bills that were coming in, and if you're not cashing people's checks in a timely fashion, they can go stale. People are concerned because they see that their bill's still outstanding if they go and check it out online, even though they sent in their check. Both my staff members said that they were very concerned about all those bills coming in, and there was just no way we were going to be able to handle the stream of constituents that come in to pay their bills in person, plus all of that mailing. So that's where I saw the need and utilization for the lockbox right away.
Versus filling the staff position.
Right, there was no way that that was going to happen in the time that we needed it to. The motor vehicle bills were going out like 2 weeks after I came in.
I'm with you. I agree. Having if he's going to permanently eliminate the position, then obviously lockbox is an improvement. There's no question. It is an aid to you. I think that just begs the question, though, is why did we drop the third needed position versus the lockbox? One thing, David, concerned me, and I, as John Q. Public, am concerned about. Lots of cash comes up to the front counter. And if there's only one person standing there collecting cash, you don't have to go to Harvard to figure out, is it one for me and one for the city? I mean, I am a little concerned about just the quality. We've had allegations out of that office in the past, and I don't want to have anything turn up missing. That's why we have multiple checks, multiple staff, multiple people who are reviewing all of these things, and I want to just make sure that if we're going to downgrade the amount of staff, those type of security protocols are in place.
Yeah, there's always right now 2 people at the front desk. There's 2 cash boxes going. They balance it out at the end of the day. I count, I verify whatever they do to close out at the end of the day. And then anytime that one person is out, the floating clerk is now trained and comes over and acts as a second person. So there's always 2 people there.
Okay. All right. So let's hope that works out. David said this was going to be, and I mean, I just got to believe when he was in there for 5 years doing a great job but I hope this will work out. What was the thinking behind moving the office downstairs? Was that, I mean, we kind of would like to be in the loop as to these things.
Sure, and my apologies, I didn't realize that you weren't in the loop on that. It was my understanding that you were. Okay. So that's my apologies on that. Just flow-wise, it's been beneficial to be right there for people. As I said earlier, anybody that comes in for a signed form for permits or anything like that, business certificates, they don't have to walk around to a million different things. We bring it right over to the treasurer's office or vice versa to get it done for them right away. I don't know that there was an emergency need to move down there. I was just told that it was a process that all the offices were moving around, and that was just one that was going to happen.
Okay. All right. We'll that's not your headache. That's between us and the chief executive. Last thing I just wanted to mention to you is your thoughts. As tax collector, you're going to have a central role to the whole leaning process, particularly the most current stuff. You've been now in the treasurer's office. You've done a great job there. Any thoughts as to things that we can do to improve that process?
There's definitely room for improvement as far as communication-wise between the tax collector and the treasurer on getting those done maybe a little bit earlier in the year. Whether the treasurer does a lot more, you know, like mail outs and trying to collect once it's leaned. If we can start finding a way to increase that process before it becomes a lien, that's one thing I'd like to look into. Another thing what happens in the tax collector's office right now, if a check gets bounced, it comes back and we take it off of Munis, but no letters go out. Nothing happens to try and collect that, especially with the $25 fee for having it returned. The treasurer's office already has a process of sending out NSF check paperwork for anything that comes out, trying to collect that and get it back. I'd like to initiate that process on our end as well so that we can start collecting those things rather than just letting it sit in a drawer.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? All right.
Gladys has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
How many of those are sort of like return checks? Do you have an estimation of that? Just can you give us a sense of how many?
Off the top of my head, not really. It's not too much, but it depends obviously on the amount of the check. And usually it's the bigger bills that are getting paid that we're going to get bouncers on. Second question.
I'm driving. I got somebody texting me. Of course, I pulled over to take the text. But which is the department that is not accepting credit cards?
We are right now. We don't have a machine because they upgraded the credit card machines. So ours, the old one, wasn't functional. So we're still April 6th. I think our new one is coming in.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. But you still have the option to pay online, of course, which you can do with cards.
We also have Linda Vacan joining us as well. Linda?
Thank you. I just have a couple quick questions. Thanks for coming down. I was just interested to know approximately how much cash each day is coming into the office.
Depends on the time of the year. Right now, because motor vehicle bills are out, probably 10,000 in a day.
So do we have a policy where there's no time of the day where we have that amount of cash sitting there? It looks like your office is right near the door. Yep. Down there, down under here. And it just seems like if you have thousands of dollars sitting in a box behind a counter near an exit, I'm just wondering what, you know, protocols you'll have to get that money in a bank or something if there's $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000 in the cash box.
Sure, I did mention earlier.
I know you do have the protocols in the count.
Yep, so each one has their own cash box, which has the ability to lock. We have the locked door, and as soon as they cash out that day, I bring the cash immediately to the bank. So I don't like letting it sit in the safe overnight or out in the thing.
But you don't have a concern about throughout the day you've got $8,000, $10,000 behind the counter?
No, because they keep a specific amount in their drawer and the rest gets put in the safe, locked away during the day. And
I'm sorry if I made you repeat yourself. I'm trying to do 2 meetings at the same time.
No problem. Yeah, so there's never that much, and individually there are 2 different cash boxes. Again, we have the locks, we have the panic buttons, and there's always someone at the counter.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is, if folks that you work with and around throughout the city were to be asked about your management style, what 3 words would you think they would come up with?
That's a good question. I don't like adjectives. Management skills.
Your style.
Sure, my style. Understanding, I would say, and diligent, and one more. Conscientious.
Thank you.
Sure.
You all set?
Yes, thanks.
Councilor Bartley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kate, good to see you again. Thanks for your patience. You've been really good interview, so I really appreciate that. Just on the cash issue, so yeah, I don't think we're raising too many red flags when we're saying there's a concern when there's a lot of cash. I mean, I was an auditor for 18 years, and there's always a concern when there's only one person overseeing things, when things in the office get really busy and somebody's got to go, or somebody's not around, they're out. Say, Rich is not there today, now we have no Spanish-speaking people in the office. So, I mean, things get hectic there. So it's a big concern. And so I don't want to just sit here and hear about, you know, Dave Guzman was here and we needed the third person and, well, geez, I think we can do it with a part-time. I don't want to hear that because you've been in there for about a length of a time of a cup of coffee. So my question mark to you is, have you conferred with Dave Guzman at all about the office? I have not. Okay. If you did get the job, would you ever think about reaching out to him about the office?
Certainly, if he, yeah.
Maybe getting some feedback about it. So now clearly I respect you 100%, and I really respect your mom and dad 100%, your family. You know that. But you know, if you get the job, you're now a department head. And I'm not so much worried about I mean, you report, yes, we do hire you, but the chain of command is, you know, you got to report to the mayor, and I get that. So, you know, you don't have to confer with us and everything, but you should feel welcome to come here and confer with, you know, Jim as the chairman of the committee, Kevin as a president of city council. I would hope you would confer with them on a regular basis, because they're kind of not they oversee you, but they'd be the most direct conduit, I would say, just by virtue of their positions. Sure. That was my comment and my question. I did have one more. I slipped my pea brain. Just give me half a second, Kate. Yeah. So Kate, when you're talking about making changes, other than, you know, changing fees and things like that, what other things were you considering? Because that was one of your initial statements when you sat down. So other than fees, what other kind of thoughts about, was it staffing maybe? Was it about hours? Was it about you know, just if you could flesh that out. You did talk about electronic, and you've been working with Bill, but you know, where are we in that process?
Right now we're in the analysis process of that. Bill and I are trying to just kind of quantify where we would save time, what the actual amounts we would gain in revenue, because now he can print tickets quicker, and also quantify how many approximately a year we get of those confused ones where we can't collect on a ticket because the information was input wrong because Debbie couldn't read the parking guy's handwriting. So we're still in the analysis phase of that right now, trying to quantify whether or not the cost to bring that in would be less than the cost that we're going to increase revenue.
Continuing education, what opportunities are there, and would you be willing to participate?
Absolutely. I'm already, as the assistant treasurer, I was an associate member of the MCTA, which has their annual school, their annual conference, which gives me an opportunity which I would take full advantage of, to get certified, which is a lot of classes on tax collector, and also you know, meet with the rest of the state collectors so you can learn best practices and create working relationships with them. So that's certainly an opportunity I would take advantage of.
And just the last thing on security, I'm sorry I didn't think of this before. Why doesn't I mean, could a member of the Holyoke police force come to your office and I mean, who goes to the bank with the cash? Is it two people, one person? Two people. They go together? Yeah. Okay, so and there's segregation of duties when they're doing the cash, filling out the receipt and counting the cash, correct? So there's segregation of duties. Okay, so two people walk together and we go to
People's Bank, right on High Street, down the street.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor McGivern?
Just if I could, just two quick follow-up questions. Katie, I started the cash stuff, and you gave some great answers to all the cash questions this evening, and I think you know why we're all interested. Just the safe you're talking about, is that the safe in what we know as the treasurer's office, or is there another safe?
Nope, we have our own safe on our side. Yeah.
And my follow-up question is, you mentioned the thought of maybe in your words, or maybe the way I heard it, of the lack of the managerial experience. You heard from, I think, several of us, and there's 15 of us, and if each of us were asked who's in charge of the tax collector, I think there'd be 15 different answers. And you gave some good answers in handling, I think, a knowledge of the mayor's role, your role, constituents, I think, is the best answer you gave this evening. But my follow-up question is, you can't have managerial experience unless you become a manager. And that's the only way you get it is by someone giving you a shot and giving you a chance. Do you consider yourself a self-starter? And if you do, can you give us some examples of what you've done in that area?
Yes. I would say initially, I'd point to the first job I came into the city with. I came in to do payroll, which was a very limited job description at the time, and kind of took it upon myself to really dive into Munis and learn that in every aspect that I could without anyone telling me, to the point where now I'm actually the Munis administrator in theory, if you could say we have one, and everyone calls me for certain functionalities and uses of that. I also initiated health insurance recons while I was in the treasurer's office. They hadn't been getting done, and I just took that upon myself, realized that there was a lack of something happening there and needed to take that on. So, and that's become a huge, big help to the city because we were losing money on never reconciling and realizing that people were on health insurance bills that weren't having deductions and vice versa. What else?
You've already answered it.
Yeah, so at this time I would say
thank you.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. And as you know, the procedure, what we're going to do is interview people, then we'll bring this to the full city council.
Great.
If you have do you have any questions for us?
No, I think I'm good at this point.
You did an excellent job. Thank you very much, and we'll be talking to you.
Great. Thank you all.
All right, we're a little bit behind, so at this point, we're going to bring up a person who's been very patiently waiting in the audience. This is for the planning board. There's an open planning board seat. This person's going to be filling the seat of Shelley King. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to take off the table in order an interview that we need to do.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. I think you kind of got the gist of the last interview. So what we're doing is just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us why you would like to be on the planning board. And then we'll open up to the floor. First, the subcommittee will ask questions if they have any, then the rest of the city council as well. So having said that, welcome, and the mic is yours. No.
Closer to you.
Make sure it's green.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Is that better?
So people can hear you.
Okay. So my name is Intia Isaza Figueroa, and I live at 71 Cherry Hill in Holyoke. I was appointed to the Historical Commission last year, and so that was pretty much as soon as I moved back to Holyoke. So I was born in Holyoke, and then went to Northampton, graduated from Northampton High, went away for college, came back to the area and moved back to Holyoke at the beginning of last year, and kind of right away wanted to get involved in sort of civic engagement in some way, and so the Historical Commission was the best way at the time to get involved, and since then I got asked about the opening at the planning board, and I think the Historical Commission has been really interesting and a good way to learn more about the city, to kind of lend whatever expertise I can. But I think the planning board is actually a little bit more suited to my background, and so I'll talk a little bit about my background. I studied urban planning as a sort of make-your-own major in college, so I did a lot of coursework at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard and at the Kennedy School of Government. So I did a lot of coursework on planning and sort of best practices in a very academic sense. And you know, one of the things I've definitely learned in the real world now that I'm working as a real estate developer in Springfield, and I worked at an architecture firm in New York for a couple of years. So seeing how zoning and urban planning plays out like in a real way on the developer side is a very different experience than the academic one. It's a very different experience than what it looks like from a purely, you know, citizen standpoint or a government standpoint. So it's something that I've been really interested in a really authentic way for a long time. And I think I have a good sense of how to read zoning ordinances, which, you know, that alone I think is something that not everyone thinks is very fun or interesting. I do. And yeah, the planning board seems like a good way to kind of get more insight into what's going on in Holyoke and have a little bit more voice.
All right, excellent. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, sir.
Oh, you're in the committee.
I'm going to do the committee first.
Thank you. Committee first. Thank you, Antilla, for, first of all, for your service on the Historical Commission so far, and for your interest in this role. I was wondering, you touched a little bit about this already with your current employment in Springfield, but if you could talk a little bit about what you think in terms of your experience at that job would be an asset for us to have you on our planning board here, and maybe just kind of a quick comparison of the similarities or the differences between Springfield and Holyoke, and what you've become familiar with in terms of that role with that employment, in terms of what you think would be an asset for our planning board here if we had you on as a part of that.
Okay. Actually, I haven't interacted with the zoning or planning too much in Springfield yet. I'm going to go before them for a zone change April 6th, so that'll be my first official interaction with the Springfield Planning Board. But I think a good example is I started sitting in on planning board meetings about a month ago, and one of the things that came up was the solar panel discussion, and one of the, you know, as an audience member, obviously, one of the questions that I raised or concerns for the folks to think about was in talking about residential versus commercial use of solar panels. I have been in meetings with developers in the area, not in Holyoke actually, but in the Pioneer Valley, talking about putting solar panels on top of multifamily units. And so one of the questions I raised was, okay, you know, we're thinking about single family and commercial, but there is this in-between space of developers who are developing multifamily. And so I don't think that that's something that anyone in the room was thinking about, but obviously given my background, it's something that I was aware of and could think of to bring up.
Anybody else? Councilor Graney?
Yes, ma'am, could you elaborate on the third area of your professional experience? The Michael von Valkenburg Associates Project Assistant. It's 2011, 2012. It says Brooklyn, New York, but the project itself was in Chicago.
Yeah.
So could you sort of
sure.
fill in the blanks there?
It is one of the largest landscape architecture firms in the country. They do a lot of projects, a lot of them in New York, but all over the country, and some in Toronto, Mexico City. So it's more of an international company at this point. But my role there actually had a lot to do with zoning because they were working on sort of big city scale projects. So one of the project that I got hired to work on and then ended up working on this one in Chicago instead just because stuff got shuffled around was on the west side of New York where all the trains come out of Penn Station. They were putting land on top of that, moving all of the train tracks elsewhere, putting in a subway station and some public parks there, which is actually now sort of happening finally. But you know, when you're building new city blocks in New York that don't exist before, all of that involves a lot of zoning stuff. So one of my tasks was to look that up. Was, you know, the project manager came over and was like, tell me how wide the street has to be. Tell me how wide the curb needs to be. What do the wheelchair corners look like? You know, so stuff like that. And literally just throw the zoning manual at me and say, like, summarize for our designers what they need to incorporate into the design. And so on the Chicago project, that was through the Chicago Public Parks, and so they have their own manual on all of their design standards. So then there are layers, right? There's like the state of Illinois, city of Chicago, then there's the Parks District, and they had like very specific needs on signage. So for signage, even something seemingly really small, you needed to look at the state rules, at the city rules, and at the park rules. And so that was something that I was researching and handing off to my managers at the time.
So you worked out of New York, but
I actually never went to Chicago during that time. I spent a lot of time on the phone with people in Chicago.
Okay. Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. Thank you for coming down. I'm going to ask you perhaps a little bit more of a technical question. I'm interested to understand, when you bring together your academic approach and the practical approach, what discretion you feel the planning board has relative to the interpretation of language as it pertains in an ordinance. For example, an ordinance that for the solar is as of right, but within the ordinance is also language such as the general welfare, the character of the neighborhood, economic considerations, etc. In the local community in the past few months, we've seen a broad difference in the function of planning boards. In some cases, it seems that as of right dominates over any other language within the ordinance. In other communities, they will interpret community welfare, character of the neighborhood, and give it equal weight to as of right, and on occasion deny a project. So I'm interested to know what perspective you would bring to the planning board in terms of interpreting ordinances and weighing the different aspects of the ordinance.
Yeah, I think my my general opinion on that is that to keep things, I think, fair and clear coming from the developer side. When you read a rule, you want to know what the intent really is. And so, and that was something that came up in the city council meeting earlier this week when that was getting discussed. That basically the more specific the ordinance language is, the easier it is for developers to follow the rules, the easier it is for people to kind of plan their business growth moving forward. And so I think that while it's important to leave that kind of open-ended language in, because you never want to set something 100% in stone, because solar technology could change and look radically different in 10 years, and so you don't want to just blanket allow things. But I do think it's important to, in the effort to make things fair and equitable, to have language be as clear and as close to the intent of what the city really wants to see, and have that spelled out as much as possible. I don't know if that answers the question. Sorry.
Well, I guess just to follow up, I take your point on consistency of ordinances. However, when you're looking at something that's as of right and you're looking at a master zoning plan, and I think we would all agree that an RA zone is drastically different from an industrial zone, and that language in the ordinance allows for discretion of a planning board. Would you see in your role as a member of the planning board that you had any discretion in that regard, given the unique occurrences that might come up with an odd, if you will, site?
Yeah, I mean, I think on that one specifically, definitely, because I think, like you said, there is a lot. I read it over during that meeting when I first saw it a few weeks ago, and I think on that specific rule there is a lot of leeway, and I don't think that applies in, there are obviously more clear-cut rules on the books, but I think especially because it's new, and that was kind of imposed on the city a little bit by some larger legislation, that it makes sense to push back and to kind of see where the wiggle room has emerged. And I think that that's where it becomes important to look at best practices in other cities and see how other cities are dealing with it and what court cases have come through, and how the language has been interpreted.
Thank you very much.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you. I also do like to say welcome and thank you for your service on the Historic Commission and for coming forward to an area where I think you have a wealth of background to share with the city. So a very, very simple question. Knowing that the city of Holyoke was established well before our zoning ordinances were even thought of, in the use of land in Holyoke centers around an industrial city, keeping residents at one time close to where they worked and now trying to protect residential neighborhoods and at the same time protect a much needed commercial and industrial community. The question is, what's your definition of spot zoning and how does it apply in Holyoke? How should it be applied in Holyoke?
I think what you point out is an interesting thing, that Holyoke is kind of the reverse of what a lot of cities that came out of planning are, right? So like in the 50s when there was this huge suburbanization, everyone was really trying to focus on keeping things as residential as possible, whereas in in Holyoke, it was always, it was designed as an industrial city, and so it's kind of the flip of what those idealized cities are. I think that one of the things that's interesting that's happening today is that there is more of a migration now into cities, and I think especially people sort of in my peer group are looking towards cities as like more interesting, more vibrant places to live, and that is because of these downtown mixed use areas, and I think that it's important to think of that as an asset in this city as much as possible, and it's something that a lot of other places don't have the chance to do, right? So I think it's an opportunity that Holyoke can capitalize on, and you know, the rules are in place for a reason, the districts are in place for a reason, and so if you go around just dropping spot zoning everywhere, then you've kind of done away with the overall scheme. But I think that there's an opportunity here given just the infrastructure of Holyoke already, and that in so much as spot zoning lets you capitalize on the use of the downtown and that sort of more vibrant community that I do think a lot of people are looking for these days, then spot zoning is a thing to consider to that end.
Thank you. That was a loaded question, but a good answer.
Councilor Lebron-Martinez.
Thank you again for coming on and also serving on the Historical Commission. So my question to you is, do you feel that the ordinance are up to date as far as the zoning are? Have you had a chance to really go through our city zoning for the city of Holyoke at least? Because I know you're comparing other communities, but and if there isn't, what do you think what type of work is needed in order to get up to date on that?
To be honest, I was handed the whole book recently, and I haven't read it through it all. It's not exactly light reading, but I do think it's important to kind of just look at best practices and see what other cities are succeeding with. I haven't done that yet, but I would if appointed.
Does anybody else have any questions tonight? Yep, Councilor.
Hey, thanks. You've given some great answers, especially downtown mixed use. I'm very supportive. Kevin Jourdain, by the way. Nice to meet. Nice to see you. And by the way, certainly very few have read through the whole ordinance book and around City Hall. So do not in any way feel that is you're out of the norm on that. I wanted to just to get to know you. I see that you're Ward 6 resident now, 71 Cherry Hill. Mm-hmm. How long have you lived in the city?
Well, I moved back at the beginning of last year, but I was born in Holyoke.
Oh, nice.
I grew up on a house on Pine Street by Wisteria-Hurst.
Oh, great. Okay, all right, very good, because I just wanted to, I saw that, so I just wanted, and so you went on the Historic Commission last year and now for planning this year. Okay, great. So I'm just going to ask you a really broad, just to kind of understand, planning is really an important board that you're stepping onto here, and one of the things that is probably the toughest thing that you'll struggle with is this balance of yin and yang between business and residential, and where these two things butt up against each other. In the downtown, it's more amenable because why I think the downtown mixed use, we can have residential and business and more harmony, and we've created a lot of new zoning to even accentuate that, especially for our artist community where they want to live where they work. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts, your general philosophy on these things where, you know, this week we had, you know, basically transcending the solar panel issue, but it really gets a lot bigger of, you know, solar panels, generally an inherent good, but also people's backyards, people's tranquility, people that live in these residences where they're up against wooded areas that they have invested the largest investment of their whole life, their home. And now they bought into something that looks like X, and now someone wants to come and, you know, clear cut a whole big area and put all kinds of solar panels there. You know, how do you balance those two when, and you're gonna, it's not gonna be just solar panels, but thinking about how you view as a planning board member these competing interests as you're giving us recommendations as to what the city council should do, because that's one of the biggest powers that you have, is businesses that are going into areas that abut residential. What is your thoughts on all of that? You know, because some people think, well, look at this new investment, but they're also tending to forget about, well, what about those 10 homeowners or those 15 homeowners that live across the street? They also have made a large investment. So I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, that's a tough one. I think that any sort of like intelligent, thoughtful response has to be that it is kind of a constant negotiation. So I don't want to make it seem like I fall sort of ideologically on one side or the other. You know, I work in affordable housing development, so this is some, you know, the term is NIMBY, not in my backyard stuff. So things that we think are good in theory for our city, we don't want to see in our own backyards, and I think that that's something I'm highly attuned to in the affordable housing industry, and I think there are a lot of legitimate concerns, both, you know, specifically in my industry, but also in general about people's, what people perceive as sort of their own space. So even if maybe their property line stops here, they still think of what goes beyond it as part of their neighborhood, and that's what we want to encourage people to think of, right? We don't want anyone to, in the city of Holyoke, to think that their vision for the city ends at their property line. So I think it's important to have in the same place where it says, you know, as of right, I think it's important to have the setbacks, it's important to have vegetation rules, and when the city decides, which I think it already has, that solar panel is a technology that we want in the city and that we think is beneficial, to make sure that those rules end up working for the people who are going to have to live with it directly. And which is not to say, you know, they already put it in the book and so now, too bad, we have to go by the rules. But I think, you know, acknowledging that when you do put stuff in as of right, that those things really need to get considered up front. And so I think, you know, the fight doesn't end there, but I think a lot of it has to be taken up at the front end of that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously the city council has a strong duty to make sure that we write these ordinances the correct way. In that particular case, we happen to be told that in these residential ones, it had to be. And of course now, it's like anything new. Now a lineage of legal cases have come forward to say, no, in fact, you have all these other types of restrictions you can in fact put. So we're mightily working to improve those type of ordinances. But you know, you're going to have a variant. I'm happy to support and to vote to confirm your nomination. But you'll have a very important role to really serve as a adjudicator between these conflicts. And I would just say, what I ask everybody is, we want industry, we want business, But by the same token, I always want to, we need to remember our residents too, who have also made important investments, and making sure because the biggest things, you know, on site plan review, all these type of things, having a sensitivity to the people that surround these things. We can have progress without steamrolling over people too at the same time, and it sounds like you're sensitive to that.
Yeah, I would say I've been really impressed in the last few meetings I've sat in on. It seems like the planning board is, and the planning staff is really thorough and like super prepared, which I has not been my experience always with, planning boards in other cities. So I think that.
No, we have a very good planning board. They're very thoughtful. Yep. Thank you.
We also have Councilor Nelson Roman that joined us as well. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, I make a motion that we confirm this appointment. So moved. All in favor? Aye. So what happens now is at our next city council meeting, our next full city council meeting, your name will be brought up for a full vote of the council. I assume that it will pass. Then when that happens, then the following day or any day after that, you can go into the city clerk's office and put your right hand up and sign the book. Okay. Then you'll be on. Okay. Any questions for us?
I don't think so.
April 5th. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, now at this time, I see Bob Judge back there. Bob, you have our next person for tax collector.
I did not make these arrangements.
Are you Saida?
Yes,
Saida. Thank you. Come on in, please.
I didn't see anything inside, so I just stood in the bench for a while.
I hear it.
Zaida, you need a cough drop?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
Zaida, thank you and welcome here. This is the Public Service Subcommittee of the City of Holyoke City Council. We make up this, and the people on the outside are city councilors as well. Tonight we're going to ask you just to say a few words about yourself and tell us why you want this job. Then our subcommittee will ask you questions, and if any other counselor has brief questions and brief stories, because we're kind of falling behind, then they can ask those brief questions. So having said that, the mic is yours.
Okay. Zaida Marsh. I am originally from Holyoke. I was born in Springfield, but raised in Holyoke for the majority of my life. I currently work for a multi-million-dollar, multinational manufacturing company. I'm currently a corporate accounting associate / assistant manager. We have 8 accountants that my manager and I overlook.
Please do. Thank you. Actually,
6 sites that we do accounting for. Prior to that, I used to work for a company in South Hadley for another manufacturing company, Canson Incorporated. And there I used to do accounts payables as well and other tasks. My manager was on maternity leave, so I pretty much took over her position for the 3 months that she was out. I have 15 plus years of accounting in the field. I am currently going for my bachelor's degree, which I'm almost done with at Westfield State.
Go Owls.
And I bring, nothing but professionalism, skills, experiences as far as accounting goes.
Excellent. Does anybody on the subcommittee have any questions first? If not, I'll open up to the full board. Does anybody have any questions? I have a few questions.
Okay.
I don't want to get you out of here scot-free. 2 of the questions I was going to ask all the other candidates, Councilor Jordan beat me to it, but I'll ask you, if you could make an improvement in your current job, what would it be and why?
I just got promoted to this position a little bit over a year and a half now, and there always seemed to be a communication issue. Sometimes my manager will make an announcement and not everyone is there. So I always say to them, it's wise to either say it and then follow by an email. There are things like that little small things that do affect a lot of people, especially in our job. you know, there's things that need to be done by a certain time, month end, stuff like that. Those are just things that I feel that you can verbally say it in a meeting or whatnot, but then I guess as a reminder, follow it with an email. So communication to me is very important, and I think that a lot of people take it for granted.
Okay, thank you. I'll go down the line. Councilor Roman?
Yes, Ida, thank you so much for being here, and I apologize to the committee members for being late. I wanted to be here for the first few interviews. I just wanted to ask a little bit about what attracted you to this position was like my part A. What attracted you to want to apply as a candidate? That's always exciting for me to know as one of the public servants. And the second thing was around your experience with the town of South Hadley, working in a municipality, if you could just expunge a little bit on that as well. So those were my 2 parts.
Okay. Well, when I saw the position on the website, I mean, I was excited. Like I said, I grew up in Holyoke, and to work in Holyoke for me would be an honor. Never had the opportunity, so. And then I liked the fact that it had all the skills that I have, all the qualifications and skills that I have. Excuse me. Like I said, 15 plus years of accounting. I bring professionalism. I love the culture of still my city. I have, you know, people skills. Going with your second question there at the municipality, I've learned to have the people skills. So I think I'm very professional in it now. I used to work for the South Hadley Police Department. So obviously everyone that goes there is not happy. So I had to learn how to deal with happy people, angry people, and most likely they're all angry. But you know, my people skills, I can say I'm very professional at it now thanks to that job. In South Hadley, I pretty much did a little bit of everything. I assisted the police chief, multiple hats. I went from, you know, did payroll to AP, AR, billing, you know, keep confidential records, pistol permit, I issued pistol permits, matron, and I love all the different tasks. You know, I love keeping busy, and it just makes the day go by very quickly. So yeah, municipalities in the city and whatnot is a very good interest of me.
Councilor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Zaida, for coming down and applying for this position. Just a couple quick questions. You stated you're applying, you're getting your degree soon?
Yes.
About how long at Westfield State will that be?
I have 10 classes, so that would be 2 full semesters. So like in a year or so.
And you're doing that, what are you doing that now, like part-time nights or?
Yeah, I do evenings, and I do the winter semesters, and I do the summer semesters right after work, yes.
Okay. And what has been your, in the last couple of years, whether this job or family or whatever, what has been your greatest challenge in the last couple of years?
My biggest challenge is basically what I'm doing right now. It's like speaking in front of a lot of people. At the beginning, I would get hives. But I've worked along, you know, volunteering and making speech in front of other people and trying to get used to speaking in public. And I think I'm doing a good job so far.
Are you comfortable with, I mean, this is an important position. You'd be like a department head in our city, working basically for the mayor, but under our appointment. Do you feel comfortable overseeing this very important position in the city and the employees in that position?
Yes, I do. Again, like I said, I have 15 years of accounting, and I have co-managerial with the current company that I'm in. So I have, you know, I pretty much, even though there is an accounting manager, I pretty much run everyone comes to me. So I pretty much run the business. and I think he enjoys it because nobody bothers him. So I believe, yes, I can take on all the tasks and everything that's required of me.
Okay, thank you.
Question for you. Our personnel director is in the back row over there, and I'm sure he's told you there's a residency requirement for this position. Mm-hmm. If you get this position, if you get the majority of the votes, would you be willing to move back here?
I would, yes.
Okay. At that time, Councilor McGivern, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also welcome and appreciate your interest. I went to Westfield State, but I'm not going to tell you what year I graduated, and good luck with it. It's a great school. And as Jimmy said, go Owls. You know? You've given us some good answers. I just want to follow up on the people part. You know, partly with the South Holyoke police experience, and noting that, you know, many people who are experienced what they have to with the South Holyoke police probably aren't having a good day. The tax collector's office is a little different. You are dealing with the general public, and you have 2, if not more, people that'll be working under you that are also dealing with the general public. And to make it a little bit more complex, cash is exchanged on a routine basis. We heard earlier it's excise tax time, and there's sometimes $10,000 coming through the window on a daily basis. Can you have any experience or any thoughts about how cash needs to be handled and what you would do to ensure the integrity of that?
Yes. Processing, in the police department, I used to process pistol permits, and there were times when I would have $5,000, $6,000 in my office. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have like a safe or anything, so the money would get stored during the day. The money would get stored in a locked drawer in my office. When I come in the morning, I usually do, I usually count all the money, make sure that what they told me it's there is there, and I sign off on a piece of paper. It wasn't the smartest thing to do, and I didn't like it the way they used to do it. I like it when somebody handles me money, I like to count in front of you and say, okay, you gave me $1,000, just like you're in a bank, you know, and that was something that I couldn't really change. And, you know, I brought it up several times to the chief, and it just I guess that was the only way it worked. But I would count it, and thankfully all the money would be there, so I would sign off on it, and I would immediately turn the money into the town, to the treasurer's department. And but working in this position, I mean, if there's a safe, I mean, depending on how the procedure is here, if at the end of the day you do deposits into the bank, then that would be what needs to be done. If it's something that you keep in a safe here, then, you know, make sure that the safe, you know, it's locked at all times. I would keep, you know, the safe to a minimum of maybe 2 people to be able to access it. I don't like multiple hands in the pot, but I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sure you guys are aware that there's a lot of things going on, and you know, you get police officers taking money and stuff like that, you know, that is just so wrong. So if I were to be hired, I would keep that money in a locked compartment or a safe or whatever is it, or if it needs to be deposited every day, then every day it will be deposited.
Good answers, especially for the handling of money. How about the accountability? How do you do that with cash on a daily basis, that much cash? How do you account and do a checks and balance?
Well, it depends on how it all comes in. I mean, there's always a paper trail. So, I mean, I'm not too sure of who's the one that handles the money, whether it's the clerk that it's in charge of the front desk or whatnot. But like I said, I usually have 2 people involved. And I guess if it's upon the tax collector to make sure that nobody else handles the money, then I guess that would be what needs to be done. If there's at least one person that is allowed, then, you know, by all means, I would let that person as well, you know, be able to have access to whatever door is locked or whatever. But I normally would count, like, I used to always have the petty cash. So every day, it was my manager and I who had access to it, and every day I would walk in and I would count the money every day. It freaks me out. I hated the petty cash. It would freak me out because there were times that when she would, you know, take some money and not put the receipt back in. So I usually balance it out during the day to make sure that everything is there. So by the time I go home, I make sure that everything is there.
All right, well,
Makes sense, and I thank you. And just for the record, you are a very good public speaker.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for our time.
Jim, actually, I had a quick question, if that's okay. Zaida, thank you for coming. I wanted to, say, so you had the opportunity. Now, the other people in your department or area, like how many people would that be?
Currently, I have 8 accountants.
8 accountants, and you're saying you're sort of the lead in that area?
I'm the manager's assistant.
Manager's assistant, okay. So you have supervision and authority over them?
I do.
Okay, excellent. And you're doing, I see here, you're doing check journal reports, check runs, you're doing transfers, closing procedures, a lot of these type of duties. So you're like general ledger work as an accountant, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And you also are bilingual?
I am.
Okay, which is really important because, you know, one of the things that I'm concerned about is Dave Guzman, who was the former tax collector in this position, who now has gone on to bigger and better things. He also was, and obviously this is a heavy, intensive working with the public, and a lot of our citizens also, you know, speak Spanish. So that would be a real asset as well. So. Anything else? Well, let me ask you this. In terms of, so reconciling the accounts, the Encore manufacturing, like how many dollars are we talking there? Like how big of an operation is that?
Well, we have 6 sites all over. And so we have a software, but we have 6 different logins for each site. And that's how we keep track of which manufacturing does how much money. If I were to tally all of them together, I would probably say that we're close to maybe perhaps $1 billion.
1 billion.
Yeah.
This company.
Yeah.
Wow. In gross revenue.
Yes. Yes. We have. Along with the 6 sites.
What's Encore? Like, what do they make?
We make electrical circuit boards.
Okay.
The boards that go inside missiles, all the boards that go inside the medical EKG scan, the screen.
Oh, okay.
The circuit boards for those flyers that you see out, those things that you see out on the highway for the Amber Alert.
Oh, sure.
Those circuit boards, and now we're opening a new line for firefighters and police department, where they can see. It's a machinery where they can sense body heat, so that it can help them with their jobs.
Wow. And so, if I was listening carefully, you said you had about a year left. You already have your associate's degree, but you have about a year left on your bachelor's degree.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Graney?
Yeah, just quickly, thank you for coming in. Upon receipt of your bachelor's, do you plan on furthering your education and advanced graduate study in the field of business?
I do. I enjoy going to school, so I'm sure that after taking a semester off, I'd probably be a little bored and go back for my master's.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so at this time, what happens is at our next full city council meeting, what we're going to do is go around and each councilor has a choice, and they get to pick a person. So I would encourage you to talk to the other councilors and that sort of thing. Do you have any questions for us?
Well, I know you guys are running out of time, but I just wanted to, I mean, and I guess you guys wouldn't know anyways, because I was going to ask if there was you know, like, what would a day at the office be like? What's a day at the city hall like?
How much time do you have?
Depends on who you're asking and what depends on what day it is. That's a good question. That's probably a question if you'd like to, seriously, if you'd like to maybe call Bob Judge and maybe set up an appointment with him.
Okay.
He's our personal director. He's the person that can walk you through that sort of thing.
Okay.
But it's definitely a busy day. It's a day full of dealing with our constituents and making sure that, you know, quite frankly, at the end of the day, the constituents are happy. Public service. So thank you at this time.
All right.
We appreciate it.
Our
You did a
information's
fantastic
on the
job.
city website, the city councilors, if you want to reach out to us or connect or have any follow-up questions, that type of thing.
Okay. Are you
I'm Kevin Jourdain, yes.
Jourdain? So you're Massachusetts School of Law?
That's right. Oh.
I have a fiance that just graduated.
Oh, okay, from MSL.
Like, just mention it.
Oh, very good, yeah.
Oh, there you go. It's not in here. It's just
I understand. Oh, that's great.
All right, thank you very much. Moving along nicely. At this time, we're going to have, is Carolyn Thomas Davis here?
She is, she's sharp, very sharp.
Mr. Chairman, is there a third candidate for tax collector, or is there something to announce?
I don't know if there's anything to announce, but on our agenda, Ryan had told me that there was a person that was supposed to be at the 6:20 slot. For one reason or another, they either didn't meet the qualifications or decided not to do this, and so we put the planning board in instead.
Is that Shelley King?
It was due to a rescinded application of Shelley King.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Sir, in the back, are you Mr. Chadwick? I am. So what we normally do is we just have any other applicants just wait in the hallway. Caroline Thomas. No. So Carolyn Thomas Davis, if you would just grab a chair here. And how this procedure works is we're the subcommittee. We're the public service subcommittee of the full city council. And so after you introduce yourself, and of course you take your time to get ready, I don't mean to rush you, you say why you want this job, this position, what kind of background you have for this position. Then we will ask questions if we have any questions. Sure. And after we're done, the full city council will have, please sit. Then the full city council will ask any questions. And of course, if you have any questions following that up, feel free. So at this time, the microphone's yours. Just tell us your background and why you want to be the city auditor.
Great, thank you so much. Again, my name is Carolyn Thomas Davis, and I am originally from Providence, Rhode Island. I'm a two-time appointed, city council appointed deputy finance director in two separate municipalities in Rhode Island, one being Portsmouth on Aquidneck Island, the other is West Warwick in Rhode Island. I've been practicing in the industry of accounting, particularly in the not-for-profit and municipal sectors for more than 10 years. I began in public accounting as a field auditor, primarily auditing not-for-profit organizations, and pretty much have just moved up in the ranks. And I often tell people that the sector of accounting, being nonprofit or municipality, I did not choose, it chose me. I thoroughly enjoy working within the municipal sector as a means of research and following along with GASB, being Governmental Accounting Standards Board. It's an ever-changing and interesting place to be in the industry. I feel that with the city of Holyoke and my pursuit of this position, that I come bringing not only theoretical and contemporary knowledge, but hands-on experience. I've read up on this municipality and some of the changes that it has undergone, and what some of the ideas that the city has collectively of where they want to be developmentally and such. And also particularly in this particular office, I'm very familiar with the work of the person that was here prior to you opening up this position and making it public again. Phenomenal reputation and big shoes to follow. However, I believe that I bring comparable skills and an understanding of good stewardship and how this particular office could actually help the city to realize the goals that it has in moving forward, and keeping also with the intention of integrity in reporting.
All right, at this time, does anybody on this committee have any questions? No? Anybody in the full city council have any questions? All right, I guess you're getting off easy tonight.
Wait a minute.
I apologize if you need me to repeat anything. I'll be more than happy to.
Start over from the beginning. No.
Which is great.
Can't teach passion.
I have a question. So let me just, I was just scrolling through the resume here.
Yes.
So Carolyn, thank you for your interest in the position and for coming. My name's Josie. I'm one of the city councilors here in Holyoke. So you were talking about how when you were in this role of Deputy Finance Director, if I understood you correctly, this was an appointment from the city council?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so I'm just kind of looking at the time frame in terms of the role in West Warwick and also in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
And these were pretty much a two-year appointment?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you left West Warwick in 2013,
actually, if I may correct you, I don't want to come across as telling untruths. They were not two-year termed appointments.
Okay.
I left after 2 years, Portsmouth.
Okay.
I left because at that time I was a married woman with children, and I would leave my house often 6:30 in the morning and not return home sometimes 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I didn't want to do that. Christina was 2 at the time.
Okay. So that was back in 2008.
Yes.
And then what about West Warwick when you left in 2013? Did you also leave, or was there not a reappointment? I'm just
there was no reappointment. Okay. And pretty much everyone that was under the administration of then city manager Mike Stanfler was dismissed.
Okay. So it was kind of a overall.
It was a mass dismissal under the guides of the governor.
All right.
And the president of the city council. They actually brought in another organization from Massachusetts to come in and take over. West Warwick did go into receivership.
Interesting. So, and now you want to come back to government?
I love it.
Okay. All right. What do you think was the most challenging thing for you, or the most challenging experience in those roles as Deputy Finance Director for those 2 towns?
I'll tell you that, first of all, each of those municipalities were very different. Portsmouth had an A++ bond rating. West Warwick was fighting to not go into receivership and eventually did. So the environments were different, which caused for the work to be different. With Portsmouth, it was just a matter of me showing up every day and maintaining what was already a very well-running machine. In West Warwick, it was walking in every day trying to figure out, is there any way that we could possibly save this sinking ship?
Okay. Well, thank you for your honest response.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carolyn, welcome, and thank you for the introduction and some fine material here that we all been trying to get through. Very interesting background, and from listening to you speak, I think it brings to highlight some of the items you've listed here on your resume. I'd be interested, and you've already touched base on loving the government sector, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on in the city of Holyoke, and it sounds like you've done your research. The auditor appointed by the city council is a very important position in terms of our finances and knowing, I think, what our finances are and knowing where we're going. And most important, I think it's a position that needs to be transparent. With that said, we have a mayor, a fairly strong form of government, although we remind all of our mayors that we are equally strong. Right, Mr. President? And from time to time, the mayor and the city council don't agree on everything. And the atmosphere might be difficult for a position of auditor. How would you handle that? And would you share all your knowledge of the finances of the city with both the city council and the mayor as required?
Well, you use the word required. It would be my job. It would be my duty to share any pertinent information with any city councilor or the mayor in the same fashion all across the board, not withholding any amount of any information from anyone. I would be going against the appointment and the position that was entrusted to me. I believe as an accountant, I have a duty to maintain a high level of reliability and integrity, and I take those things very seriously in the reporting and that I'm producing, making sure that the reporting is accurate, and while I'm sharing the information with the people who need the information in order to make important decisions, I need to know that those decisions are being made with the right information because I'm producing that information. I realize, having worked not only just in government, but even sitting on community boards and just, dealing with people, that there will be, disagreements. There will be different work styles. There's, diversity. But we, as professionals, understanding that maybe we don't do things the same way or see situations in the same manner, at the end of the day, we're working together collectively toward the same goal. And I think that supersedes everything else. So, you may not like my shoes one day. You may not like my choice of suit. But I need you to respect my work. And that's what's important.
Carolyn, the auditor in the city of Holyoke sits on our municipal retirement board, part of the Massachusetts retirement system itself. Do you have any experience with retirement and the laws and how they're applied and how you feel you would fill those shoes?
Yes, sir. I actually do have experience. I didn't practice that experience as much in Portsmouth, but in West Warwick, where we had an issue with underfunded pensions, working alongside with the actuaries, with OPEB, trying to figure out what will be the best case scenario in terms of the payouts to our retirees. Most of that information was based upon the numbers that I was able to produce, the reporting that I was able to produce to ensure that we could have the most realistic and the most satisfying end results possible.
And my final question, the Massachusetts Department of Revenue is in love with the Munis system. Are you familiar with the Munis system? I am familiar with the Munis system. Could you just share some of that with us?
Well, the Munis system is equivalent to what we had in Rhode Island general laws. So it basically the Munis system talks to the they're just established guidelines as to the way the municipalities are supposed to work. It's coming more or less from a fiscal perspective. I will be honest with you, I can't quote every single one that's there, but I am familiar with it and I know how to get to the answers.
I don't think anybody could. But thank you.
Councilor Graney?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming in tonight. I have what may be considered a loaded question for you on a very controversial topic in the state of Massachusetts these days. On your professional activities and achievements, it says you provided consultation to various Rhode Island charter schools, assisting with adherence to software conversions, accounting structure, reporting, meeting Department of Education, and uniform chart of accounts. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Okay, the uniform chart of accounts, actually we refer to it as UCOA. And basically, UCOA is a chart of accounts that was developed through the Rhode Island Board of Education that would bring in all of the reportings from every charter school in the state and make it uniform. For example, School A would not be using QuickBooks while School B is using Peachtree. So what they did was they got together and they decided what's the best software package that we can mandate these schools to get on so that we can ensure that that the chart of accounts would function with the one that we've created and will give us the information or crank out the reports that we need in order to do our jobs, so we don't have to fish through everyone else's reports to figure out whether or not they're satisfying what it is that they needed. So because I just happened to be so well versed in MIP Sage, which was the software that they decided to go along with, and I had served as a interim business manager for a charter school and understood exactly what the standard was that as it related to UCOA, I did put in a bid. I did ask, could I come in and help to consult with some of the folks business managers in the charter schools whom I already known and had worked with, to just help them to move along and to be able to meet the specifications and the guidelines that the board was calling for, and I was able to do that. So that's what it is.
To follow up on that question, did you find any discrepancies?
I wouldn't so much say I found discrepancies as much as I found ideas that didn't necessarily meet the standard that they were trying to make in terms of ease of reportability, ease of transaction, being able to kind of segregate certain costs or to navigate and build reports that would be isolated from other information that may not be necessary at a particular time. It was a little difficult to find ways to produce those types of reports and documents. The idea from the perspective of being able to have them was very good, but there was some difficulties and challenges in being able to achieve those standards, but we did.
Thank you.
I have Councilor Valentine, then Councilor Tallman.
Thank you. If there was one word that your supporters would use to describe you, what would it be? And also, what would the word be for your detractors?
Detractors, I'll first, because that's the easiest. I could be considered not easily swayed. Little tough to deal with that time, firm. But funny, I think people who support me would also say that I'm even quite adaptable. I would say that I'm adaptable. I think most often you're defined as firm when folks are not getting the answer that they want. And unfortunately, sometimes this industry, this office will produce information that people are not necessarily in favor of. But at that point, that's when we have to be, we have to take the time to try to explain what it is, why it is. But I do like to try to find that happy medium. I do enjoy making my customers happy. I don't like people to not be satisfied with what I give them. And I believe in accounting, I don't like the word creative, but I think there's always another way. There's always a way.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Carolyn, for coming down for applying for this very, very important position with the city. I was looking through your resume and see that your qualifications you have in there. You're a lot of education, very qualified for the position. Couple quick questions I have. What would you consider a couple of your strengths that you have?
Policies and procedures, internal controls. I really enjoy making sure that we remain updated in terms of safeguarding the assets, not only within the organization, the municipality, but outside of it as well. I've learned a lot going through the process with West Warwick, which eventually, didn't end the way that we wanted it to. But along the way, I learned a lot in terms of what could be done to be preventative. So again, a lot, some of the age-old ideas, policies and procedures, being, just very not firm, but descriptive. We tend to have a lot of P&Ps in municipalities that leave a lot of flexibility and are not very, the right word. They just don't speak to the day. They don't speak to the day. And I think that's what may cause a lot of grief for us at times. But yes, policies and procedures and dealing with management is what I believe to be my strengths.
Okay. A couple other quick comments there. What would you consider your work style?
I think I have a very versatile work style. I think my style tends to shift from project to project. If I'm dealing with the month-end close, I think I don't have the same attitude that I do when I'm dealing with something a little more complicated, such as bonds. So I have a very flexible work style.
Okay.
But I am hands-on.
That's important. I talked earlier about strengths, and we're all human. We all have our own weaknesses.
Yeah.
What would you consider your weaknesses, and what can you do to improve on them?
I think one of my biggest weaknesses, one of my biggest challenges is my inability to say no. I like to be the person that people come to and say, hey, Carol, do you mind? Would you join this? Would you sit on this? And the answer usually is always without a thought, yeah, sure, be happy to. And then before I know it, I'm a little overwhelmed. So I think that's something that I need to improve upon, to not be jumping at an opportunity to allow myself to get too stressed and not be able to stay focused and balanced on the position at hand.
Okay. Big question now. I lived here all my whole life. I love this community, love this city, and I see you living in Springfield. But this job, you have to live in the city. Would you have any problem at all moving to Holyoke and living in our great city?
Whatsoever.
Whatsoever, okay.
None whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if I don't see any other questions, all right, so now what happens at our next scheduled city council meeting is we, the city council, all of us get to pick one person, and that person who gets the majority vote is now going to be our city auditor. So I would probably encourage you to go to the website, find out the names, give calls and that sort of thing. Do you have any questions for us?
I do.
Sure.
I'm very curious to know, because as I stated, I did take a look at the recommendations that were given to the city in regards to how this office should be laid out, the segregation of duties, and even some of the streamlining of certain responsibilities. And I also looked at the person who was here before the position opened up, and I see that he was very well regarded with his work style, yes, his firmness, yes, and his attention to detail, and his willingness to be steadfast and firm in stewardship.
Sure.
I would like to know, are we looking to actually replace that person, or are we looking to bring someone in with a fresh perspective and an unbiased opinion of the office, the council, the city, and the work that needs to be done?
Well, I think with 15 city councilors, you'd have to ask 15 different people.
Yeah.
Every person gets to pick their person. I'm glad that so many city councilors came here tonight to hear you and to read your resume. And I do have to let you know that every councilor does have a copy of your resume and your interest letter. What we, at least I can only speak for me, but I want the best for the city of Holyoke. I want the best in every position. I don't care if they're tall or short. All I care about is they love the city as much as I do. Right. So having said that, if you have any other questions, we have Bob Judge in the back, and he's more than apt at handling your questions. So I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Just quickly, Ms. Davis, my answer to your question is yes.
Okay, have a good night now. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I do appreciate you considering me and bringing me in, and I look forward to speaking with you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We like your passion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Harry?
Yes. Oh, shoot.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Hello, sir. How are you tonight?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm Jim Leahy, the chairperson of the Public Service Committee. Tonight, once you get settled. Sorry to rush you.
No, that's quite all right.
We are the Public Service Subcommittee, and on the outside are other city councilors. So tonight, what we'll ask you to do is state why you would like this position as a city auditor and your background, your qualifications, and such. Then we will get a chance to ask you any questions that we have, and after that, the other councilors will as well. So having said that, just give us an overview.
Thank you.
Just make sure the green light's on and you speak into the microphone.
Okay. Like something like this?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Why am I interested in this position? I've, early on in my career, after coming back home to Massachusetts, I was out in California for a while. And when I came home, I was appointed as the Hampshire County Treasurer, and I sat on the Hampshire County Pension Board. By virtue of my title, made me the chairman of that board. When I interviewed for that position, they didn't really spend a lot of time talking about the retirement. They were all about the county and how the county was financially strapped and our revenue sources were going away, and talk about the jails and House of Corrections going over to the state, and Secretary of State taking the Registry of Deeds, which were the other financial components for the county. And as you know, then the county eventually got abolished. Knowing that the county was going to be abolished and had an accounting degree and had learned quite a lot about the retirement system for almost 7 years on the board, there were some audit positions open in the West, and I entertained that and was hired and spent 10 years in the field as a field auditor from August of '97 to just about December of '07. And then in January of '08, they gave me the opportunity to lead the audit unit. And the last 8+ years, that's what I've been doing. The interest in this position, it basically brings me back home and puts me back in a municipal setting. I've had to go down to Boston, Somerville, where the Public Employment Commission is, and I have to be in that office 3 days a week and stay down there a couple of nights. And I only entertained taking the lead auditor's position and running the audit unit if I had had living accommodations down there. And I had a relative in Melrose, two towns removed from Somerville, and I was able to hang out there. That somewhat changed in 2015 and into 16, and it's time for me to come back home.
Sounds good. Does anybody on this, any questions? Does any other councilor have any questions? Councilor Jordan?
Mr. Chadwick, could you just expand kind of on your duties with the retirement board as the chief auditor? I think this is kind of important also to focus on because, as you know, the city auditor has a seat on the Holyoke Retirement Board, ex officio in that capacity. Could you just talk a little bit more about your duties as chief auditor for PERAC and some of those functions, and why you think those experiences would be very beneficial in this position?
When they had offered me the job in January of '08, I told them that there would be 2 challenges to accepting that position. The first one I didn't think would be any issue whatsoever because it was getting back into management and supervising staff, and I had done that at the county level. I had the county treasurer's office with 4 individuals there, and the retirement office, because I was in the office and chair of the board, there were 4 individuals on the retirement system staff. Second challenge in accepting that position as the chief auditor for the Commonwealth of the audit unit was I had been working side by side with a lot of the people that I would now become their supervisor. So you'd have to be able to separate that. I was fortunate that we had seasoned people that were on the audit unit, and the transition was relatively easy. I think I've been a very good supervisor. I've handled people well. Growing up, Chadwick is English, but the other side of the equation is Italian. So the Chadwick is dedicated to making something good and striving for something, but the Italian is the people skills and the getting along with people and always searching out for the right answer. I think in my resume I attached, and I couldn't have asked for kinder words from my deputy chief auditor who retired, and how he perceived me as a supervisor and as a leader of that audit unit. And my duties required me to now assign the 8 field auditors and scheduling And we always tried to send, if I could, geographically, because we have a, as you know, a rectangle state with the Cape tail. And I had the responsibility for 106 systems when we started. The Mass Turnpike merged into the state, and AFL recently decided to merge into Worcester Regional. So we have 104 systems, audit those on a triennial basis, and I've always tried to mix up the audit team where we could. 2015 became a very challenging year. We started the year with 8 field auditors, as I had, and by the time we got to September, we had lost 6 of our field auditors. So we lost 75% of our workforce. And it was a challenge to start juggling around, and certainly we got behind because we're required to do a third of the retirement systems every year. In the statute of under 32, we have triennial audits. And so we were behind, and we started to rebuild the audit unit, and we're pleased with the people that we brought in. And those are my basic responsibilities: scheduling and monitoring performance evaluations of the audit staff. I know people from one end of the state to the other in this position, even at the municipal level, and a number of times we've had cash reconciliation issues. And even in Holyoke, at one point in time, we had that issue here. But they went through that, and the latest audit we just did back in July and August of 2015 was a good audit, and I was on that assignment here.
So you have familiarity, obviously, previously with the city and a number of our finances here.
Yes, I know the people, certainly in the retirement system. Cheryl Dugree and Erica and Melissa do an outstanding job, and the board making good decisions. I know you have 26 money managers, so we're getting a lot of asset class differences out there, et cetera. And I'm aware in the audit office there are, I like to call them the 2 Sues and 1 Deb. Deb Della Penna, Susan Sheehan, and I forget the other last name, but I'm aware of the staffing.
Okay. And I know you don't live in Holyoke currently, but you're willing to relocate to the city if in the event that you were selected for this position?
Yes, I am. My wife currently works in Springfield and Longmeadow, and we live in Hadley. And from time to time, more recently than not, she keeps telling me that she can't take this commute. And it's kind of funny for me because since '97 as a field auditor and then as the lead auditor for the last 8+ years, that's all I do is commute, here, there, and everywhere. But she's also involved with a number of nonprofits, the Junior League of Springfield. We were helpful in participating in some of the resurrection of the Holyoke Children's Museum.
Oh yeah, I know it well.
We were there. So she has looked at a number of properties. I don't need to tell the guys in the room that the house is for the woman, so she's very particular and looking at a lot of things. We kind of like the Highland area where all the college streets are, Yale, Amherst, Dartmouth, etc. So yes, I understand there's a residency requirement, and we have already been looking to move to Holyoke.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Hey, Councilor Graney?
Yeah, Mr. Chadwick, I look at your resume. It dates from April 1990 to the present. Did you have work experience prior to 1990?
Yes, I did. I was in California for about 13 years. I had a 1.5 years at the University of Southern California in the accounting department with 10 other accountants. And then the last 12 or so years, I went over to crosstown to their rival, UCLA. And I started off in the Grad School of Education as an accountant doing the contracts and the grant accounting. And then I took a promotion and an assistant controller to the Division of Continuing Education, where we offered 4,500 at that time classes and programs to the working public.
I was curious about that because that doesn't show on your resume.
I didn't think that it was all that important since I'm back in Massachusetts and I highlight my Massachusetts time more than anything. And you can see by my resume as an appointed public official, as a county treasurer, and then coming over to the Retirement Commission, I've been on both sides of staffing and the oversight regulatory agency. And I have spent 19 years, almost 19 years, at PARAC, the Public Retirement Commission.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chadwick-Carey, welcome to Holyoke, welcome to Massachusetts, not welcome to Massachusetts, but welcome and thank you for your thoughts on a tremendous amount of history, both on county government and what has happened, I think, over the years in terms of retirement systems, but a lot of things in the Commonwealth. There's no doubt your knowledge of retirement, the retirement system is evident. So I think you understand that, like many municipalities, we have an unfunded liability issue. Knowing that, do you have any thoughts, and I'm not looking for a commitment, as to whether the City of Holyoke's retirement board should join the state in terms of their assets, or should we keep them separate and manage them here?
The state fund, known as the PRIT Fund, Pension Reserve Investment Trust Fund, has done very well, and there are approximately 90 plus of our retirement systems that have a piece of the PRIT Fund, either in total or they will buy asset sleeves. Holyoke, as I mentioned, has 26 investment managers covering a myriad of asset classes, and they've done very well. It needs to be attended to. Yes, there's an unfunded liability because we're all the retirement systems are working toward full funding. We're on schedules to fund these retirement systems up to like 2034 or 2036, whatever. I think Holyoke's is maybe about a $12 million annual appropriation, if I remember. I got a hold of the 16 budget here, and I was comparing it to the 15 budget that I got off the website, so I was trying to get a little bit more familiar with the finances. I think Holyoke is doing fine. I think they're meeting their obligations for their funding schedule. I know that they're watching their asset classes and how they perform against the benchmarks. And if there were any concern at all, we have now under the pension reform of 2009 a Chapter 23B requirement for procurement. So you have to go out to bid. And I believe that was just recently changed, that every 5 to 7 years you should take a look at the managers you have and the asset classes you have. But it's got to be monitored. And I think Holyoke is doing a good job with that.
No doubt you have the knowledge of the Munis system. Are there any thoughts about Munis and how we use it or how we don't use it?
One of the first things that I had to do when I got to the county, they still had the giant big ledger books on the counter with these columns and everything, and we had to computerize. And after I've been involved with that as well in California, and when I had looked at what we had here, we tried to fit the system to how we did business. And we had a number of people come in and say, well, this is how we do it, and you'll have to change this. And if you tweak this a little bit, that'll fit our system here. And those are the ones I was not interested in, because the way we did business is the way we want the system to accommodate how we do things. Munis I'm aware of. I don't think it would take that long to get up to speed on that. We certainly have seen Munis where we've audited, because when we do the municipal side of looking at cash, we know that the software, payroll softwares are Munis, Harper's, ADP, and there's some new ones popping up, so we are aware of what the components are, but primarily, again, from the retirement side. Pay codes, pay types, what's regular comp, what isn't, what are you holding for contributions from people, what you should and shouldn't do. So I'm comfortable that I would learn Munis pretty good.
It sounds like you're familiar with our form of government, fairly strong mayor. As I said to the last candidate, city council, that reminds all the mayors that the city council is kind of strong too. We appoint the auditor. The mayor is a day-to-day operation, chief financial officer. How do you see your role in terms of each independent, but of each body, the city council and room one, having the knowledge of the finances of the city? Is it important that we each have this, we're on the same page at the same time and accurate information is shared, or do you see it a different way where you work with room one, tweak everything, then come to the city council?
I'll draw on my experience as the county treasurer. When I took that job, before they had a charter change in 1988, there were 3 county commissioners at large, just like in Hampden County would have 3 county commissioners. Part of the charter change was going to appoint their fiscal officer. So I not only was the county treasurer, the county accountant, the county auditor, the finance guy, everything, budgets. The charter change called for 25 county commissioners. They wanted to give representation to each community in Hampshire County, which there were 20, and based on population, some of the communities could have more. Amherst had 3, Northampton had 3, East Hampton had 2, and when you took all the other ones, you had 25 county commissioners, put together by an administrator. The responsibility was to bring to the body reasonable options that they could choose, digesting financial suggestions that they would all have. A number of them all obviously were looking out for how decisions would benefit their individual community. Here you have 15, I believe, city councilors, all from different wards. And I know everybody is looking out for their own ward. So it's a lot similar to what I had a long time ago, where you want to give fair representation to everybody. And I think my role here would be, whatever is before us, is to digest numbers, draw on past experience, bring to the body options and suggestions and thoughts, and certainly aid in the helping of you making good decisions for the city at large.
That's an excellent answer. My final question, and it's going to be the most difficult one you face this evening, is there's a picture of a gentleman on the wall behind my shoulder here. His name is Jim Shea, 40-year city clerk. He had 2 brothers. Both went to a university not too far from here, and they wrote a song, a very famous song. It's the Notre Dame fight song. When you were in California, when the Irish were playing the Trojans and the Bruins,
yep.
Who were you rooting for?
Well, good question, because I like Notre Dame as well. And but I also had done the payroll at the USC Trojan Coliseum there, and I couldn't get that done quick enough so I could watch the second half. But I am reminded of the no, I'm not going to bring that one up because it didn't fare too well for the Irish. I'll leave that one off. But if you want to know, it was the time that USC was down 28-0.
Oh, I remember that one.
And Charles White scored 4 touchdowns in the second half.
And there you go.
Lost control of this meeting.
7 years later, it reversed.
All right.
Yes.
Where
Any other questions?
No, where the USC was up by 28 points, and the Irish came back and did it. Thank you.
Always a great rivalry.
All right, so we have Councilor Tommy and then Councilor Bresnahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick, for coming down. I noticed you have, you're very knowledgeable in your resume, seeing that you're very in tune with what's going on in not only county government, but city government. And you've even told us a lot about our city that you've been working with as an auditor, doing audits. A couple questions. A question I have is, if you were hired for this position, what would be one of the first things you do when you step into that office?
Well, I would want to sit down with each staff person, see what they do, get a handle on the daily duties and responsibilities, then get a closer look at the budget and numbers and everything. I know you're all probably getting ready to work on the FY17 budget. I see where we are in the 16 budget, and expenses seem to be kind of driving a little bit more than the revenue we're bringing in. But I've got to get acclimated to the situation. I would probably have to do a lot of reading to catch up on things where you are, come to some of your meetings. I was used to in the county going to meetings at night for the county commissioners when they met, so I'm not opposed to having night meetings and whatever I need to do. But I think you got to start with the staff and look what's going on and who's doing what and how we're doing it, and then how I fit into that and where we go.
Okay. The other question I have, and I asked it to the other candidate, I know you have definite strengths, but would you have consider any weaknesses in something that you can learn from or you can grow with and overcome those weaknesses?
No, I don't have any at all.
None at all?
None at all. At this point in my career, I would like to think that whatever I had as I was growing and developing from position to position, that whatever they may have been, I do public speaking, I've done presentations statewide, I've been on the podium at the retirement conferences, we've even attended Treasurer Collectors Association meetings at their school in Amherst. I like that week because I get to stay locally here. And we've done presentations to treasurers on bank reconciliations and the duties and responsibilities that they have to their respective systems. So I'd like to think at this point in my career, I don't have very many left. if I have any at all. Thank you for the question.
Okay, our last...
And you're very humble, Mr. Chadwick.
And thank you for that. I've been at this a long time.
Our last auditor that was here full-time...
Brian Smith.
He was here for about over 25 years, I believe. Would you consider this position, if we appointed you, to be your lifelong calling?
This would round out my career from starting at a county middle layer of government to an oversight agency dealing with retirement systems and back to a municipality. Yes.
So you would basically retire from this job?
Probably.
Do you have any idea how many years you would be in this job?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I wouldn't ask that if I were you.
Okay.
Councilor Bresnahan?
Bob Judge is shaking his head over there.
I'm shaking my head over it.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks for coming down. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My question, thought, comments, one of my major concerns is that, you know, the city council appoints basically the financial bureau of the city of Holyoke. And what we try to maintain is that the city council but continues to appoint and work with them, correct? Now, my concern is that the mayor seems to be having some of his folks perhaps come into that position, which that's fine. I have no issue with that. But as my esteemed colleague pointed out, Brian Smith was here for years, went through probably 5 different mayors, and for some reason he just got up and walked out one day. That was a career job. He was civil service. He was untouchable. Okay, he could have been here for the rest of his life. Went on to bigger and brighter things, perhaps. I don't know, and I don't know why he left, and it's not my business. I guess my question to you is that, you know, when you're standing in front of the mayor, and he perhaps, any mayor, who knows what the mayor could be, and, you know, he wants you to do something that you may not want to do, or it may not be in the best interest fiscally of the city of Holyoke, or certain protocols have to be done through the auditor's office, and you're in control of that. And the day-to-day operations of your office, you're going to be dealing with the mayor's office. I'm very concerned that we maintain that the auditor, the tax collector, the assessor continue to answer to the city council. Not that they do their bidding, but that position has a clear understanding that they report to the city council. They're not disciplined or answer to the mayor's office. So I want to know that you are someone that is going to say, you know what, this is the politics in the city of Holyoke are palpable. Whether or not, I'm sure you're aware of that. I'm also sure you're aware of the financial crisis that the city of Holyoke is now currently facing. With, you know, the receivership,
I'm aware of it.
The receivership of the schools. You know, I mean, once the state's got their teeth in you, so to speak, anything's possible. So I just want to be sure that, you know, you got a great resume, you got a lot of experience, but, you know, having a strong mayor and a strong city auditor can sometimes be problematic for the city of Holyoke.
And I will answer that again going back to my municipal county days. When you wear multiple hats, and in this particular case, a mayor wants something from the auditor and the city council is who I am being appointed by or given this opportunity. When I was in the county, though, as the county treasurer, I wore the other hat as the chair of the retirement board. When I went to that retirement board, I was supposed to make decisions that were in the best interest of the retirement system members and the retirement system in general, which is the same thing you would find here as well. You wear 2 hats here. And I can recall that the county administrator one day, because there was a vote on the retirement board that didn't suit him or the county, and he called me in the office and he said, "I don't think you get it." I said, "Excuse me, what don't I get?" "You didn't vote the way we want you to vote on that retirement board." And I said, "Well, I can't do that. When I'm on that retirement board, I'm supposed to make decisions that are for and in the best interest of the members of that retirement system, as well as the employing units." And in the county, there were 36 units that belonged to that retirement system. Here, the city has the housing authority, and I think the geriatric authority is no longer. Right. And it was a very difficult statement to make to my boss, the county administrator, but I'm supposed to make decisions or give you options that are in the best interest, not just for all, but for the city and through you. So that was a very difficult time. But having worn those 2 hats, I think I grew from that and understood and learned what my responsibilities were, who I report to, and yes, if you have a mayor, we all have to work together. And I think I'm not making a political speech because I've seen all these debates and everything, but we have to come together as a group, make good decisions for the city, and all kind of come together.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Seeing none, what happens now at our next city council meeting is April 5th. We have the opportunity for any councilor to vote whomever they choose. So I would recommend to you, sir, that go onto the website, get the councilors' names and numbers, and give everyone a call. Do you have any questions for us?
I do not, but thanking you for the opportunity to come before you, I'd like to give to you a thank you letter for this evening's opportunity.
Peter Tomlin would like you to mail it. He's a mailman. It was a bad joke.
I have others if you want your own individual copy, and I signed them all too. And I've also attached 3 references. People that I think know my character, know my experience, my knowledge. The first fellow there, he was my supervisor for 6 years of those 8 as the chief auditor. And he retired and went on to be the president of the Mass Retirees Association. So he was my immediate supervisor for 6 years, and he knows me better than I would think my current supervisor. And the other 2, Frank Zika there is the director of the Brookline Retirement System, but he worked 14 years as a PERAC auditor, and I worked in the field with him. And he knows my skill level, my talents, my abilities. And the fellow, the third one is my deputy chief auditor that wrote those kind words for me and attached to my resume. And thank you very much for the opportunity. I do appreciate it, and I wish you all well.
Oh, we appreciate it too. Thank you very much, sir. Bob, maybe walk him out and get.
I can see where I'm going.
Bob, Willie's right outside. Can you have him? Sure. Thank you.
Have a good night, sir.
Thanks. Take care.
Nice Easter.
Yeah, thank you too.
Stop it. You know how I remember that.
Hello, sir. How are you? I'm well, thank you. If you could just have a seat right there, make sure that the green light is on your microphone. Do you have any handouts?
Yes.
Okay.
15 of you are here?
There's most of us. There's 11, but you can leave them. We could have our administrative assistant make sure all the other counselors get them. Thank you, sir.
We got it right here.
Excellent. Thank you for this. So the purpose of tonight is getting to know you. What we'll do is we'll have you say, who you are, why you want this position, your background, that sort of thing. Then we, as the Public Service Committee, will ask you questions. And once we're done, we'll open it up to the floor and have the full City Council ask you questions as well. So having said that, you have the floor, sir.
My name is Willie Morales. Thank you for having me here. I'm originally from New York City, and my family had me come back and forth between Springfield and Holyoke all of my life. I spent 3 years of my life right on Chestnut Street as a youngster, and I came into public policy and public administration by accident, sort of. I was in Europe during the Bush administration, working with the opera. I'm a tenor.
Wow.
And in Europe, people are very passionate about their politics, and they kept asking me, what's happening over there in that country of yours? And I honestly didn't know, and I felt embarrassed that I didn't know. So as soon as my 10-year ended with the opera company, I came back with a mission to become educated on how to change things. I was just like the average person, kind of always complaining about what is not being done. And through education, I learned what I actually could do. in terms of the structure of the government, and I have a passion to try to bring that understanding to the layman, to the everyday person.
Does anybody on this committee have any questions? Does anybody in the full city council have any questions? I guess you got off easy tonight, sir.
Wait.
I don't know why. No, it's not.
I got it.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Mr. Morelson is not related to the city auditor's position, but have you ever sung the Toreador song from the opera Carmen by Bizet?
I'm not a baritone. I'm a tenor.
Okay.
But I've
there is a part there, though, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a part. Don Jose.
Sure, go ahead.
I have a question about the job, not opera.
Okay.
So I see that your last experience was as a city manager in Hudson, Iowa, and that was about 2 years. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that and how you think that specific job would be helpful in terms of what you're looking to do with us here for the city?
I came into the city manager position in Hudson as an intern, as part of the public policy program at the University of Northern Iowa. After the month that I was required, the people running the city did not know how to reinvest or handle municipal bonds. And through that, I helped them recharter their government, and I was the first city manager for that city. My experiences here were comprehensive, a comprehensive understanding of municipal management and the interests with respect to finances and investment of a city, and it directly transfers to this position.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Joe, Councilor McGivern?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Willie, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
As a city manager or anywhere in your experiences, did you deal with any municipal employee retirement systems, and if so, can you elaborate?
Yep. As a city manager, I had to manage a staff of 16 people, but indirectly really 45, because a utility company, which was once part of the city, divorced, but their human resources were left over to the city. And I've had plenty of experience with the retirement and trying to fund those retirements. So as they relate to the city here, what is your specific question about what you need for Holyoke? Because
if any of the experience you had, throughout your career, you think would apply to the retirement system within the city of Holyoke, which is part of our state retirement system?
The experience that I had in helping the city of Hudson finance its liability and responsibility to its retired employees directly transfers in terms of being able to estimate the trends and keeping the city as closely tethered to those projections as possible.
Okay. In Holyoke and lots of across Massachusetts, there's an issue of unfunded liability. A lot of it dates back to the system beginning, and most municipalities didn't fund their existing employees the way they should have, and some of it relates back to the way we fund them now. Are you familiar with that, or do you have any thoughts about?
I'm familiar with that, and a way to possibly attenuate it is to try and create new ways to keep them in the system longer, the current employees. Sorry? If you can reposition them so that they don't retire completely, or offer them partial retirements so they can constantly contribute to the system without taxing the system.
Department of Revenue, we'll switch this up just a little bit. In Massachusetts is very high on the Munis system, the software that they use. Yeah. Is it something you're familiar with, or what you are familiar with, do you think it's something that you could easily change over to?
I'm familiar with Munis, and it can be a really big headache if it's not directly tied to your Excel functions and all the receipts are not in there at the same time. In terms of the administration of the city in Hudson, when I started there, part of the learning was to learn the program, and I was lucky enough to have them schedule the software company come in and do a retraining for everybody who used Munis.
Munis in Massachusetts loves to do that, and they love to charge.
Yeah.
So your experience as city manager, and you explained how you got there and what you did. I think that's wonderful. Who did you answer to as a city manager? What type of government was it?
The city council.
Okay.
The town council.
So you pretty much there was no mayoral part of the government. It was just...
There was a mayor, but he was the head of the city council.
Oh. Okay. Holyoke isn't like that.
I know that.
And I think you probably heard this question, but we have what is called a strong mayoral form of government. We have a city council that have over the years reminded the mayors that we have a strong city council too. And we don't always agree on everything. But one thing we know is the body known as the city council and the mayor need to know the finances of the city. And I, for one, believe that we should know at the same time together what the accurate finances of the city are. Do you see that as your role, and how would you do it knowing that sometimes the mayor may not want you to share everything with us?
The city auditor position, as I understand it, needs to have a certain amount of independence and objectivity. And you want to preserve checks and balances, and you want to, there's a lot of football analogies floating around a municipal government. And what I want to say for the city auditor position is, I'm not the football team, you are not my coach, I'm not your quarterback. I provide the ground that you're playing on, the laws of physics that let you play, the object happenings of the government, of the administration. That's what the city auditor does. So that you have an objective way of measuring a program, hopefully ex ante.
Nice answer. I like that. I really like that. Now let's. My final question. We're going to switch from football to basketball.
Oh boy.
Is Iowa State going to win? Is Iowa State going to win tomorrow night?
I know the Cyclones are pretty good. So.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Councilor Graney?
Mr. Morales, I'm more than curious. This question on your resume, you say that you increased Hudson's commercial tax base over $1 million by drafting resolutions and ordinances that facilitated the city's commercial development strategy. Could you just give me an example of that?
Sure. The state of Iowa has an economic development function just like many other states. But what they do is they offer a third-party development company named McCallum Sweeney and consulting agencies. And what they do is they go out and they do a site survey to see if you have developable lands. Now, part of that process is making sure that administratively there's no barriers to get the lands developed. In some cases, they have faced barriers of certain communities holding onto the lands, not wanting to divest themselves of the land. In Hudson, I was able to develop ordinances with the zoning director to facilitate that process so that commercial development could happen there. So it's if you have a plot of land, this company comes in and tells you how to make it developable and how to bring a market drawing board there so that you can attract big business.
So that was pretty well geared to a rural environment.
Mm-hmm. And we were able to bring a target processing unit there.
Okay. Could you think of any examples how something like that would be applicable to the city of Holyoke?
Well, we're here. You might want to get more creative with TIF zones. In particular, maybe your housing TIF zones, which buildings you want to use and for how long you want to use them. Just get more creative with that. I'm not sure in terms of what your sites you can have developed, but McCallum Sweeney, they are certainly available to come here. The private-public relationship is something that I feel that I specialize in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, Councilor Tallman?
Yeah, real briefly, thanks, Wooly, for coming down. I appreciate you applying for this very important position. What would you consider your management skills, your style, management style?
As a style, I'm more of a change control kind of expert. So I don't believe in making comprehensive changes that are not supported by evidence. So I'm not going to say, oh, we need less man hours on this day. I believe in changing one thing at a time, evaluating it, determining if it was successful, and then moving forward, just in the interest of saving money to the city.
Okay. And question I've asked several of the other interview people, weaknesses. Do you have any weaknesses?
I think a lot, and I read a lot. and sometimes you want something expedited, and I will give you resistance because I don't believe in spending people's money without assessing risk.
Okay, thank you.
Good answer. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
A fantastic resume here, and what happens now is April 5th is our next full city council meeting, which is the first Tuesday in April. I'm sorry?
Just quickly, there is a residency requirement for this position. Are you willing to move into the city?
Yep, I own a home in Springfield right now, but it's easy enough to rent an apartment here and just move everything over.
Okay, so having said that, so April 5th at our next city council meeting, what happens is every city councilor, there's 15 of us, votes on and gives a name. And so I would encourage you to go to the website, get everyone's phone numbers, and give all the city councilors a phone call. You certainly don't have to be here. You can come if you'd like. But I want to thank you for your time. Do you have any questions? April 5th. Do you have any questions for us?
Yep. How soon are you guys looking to have your city auditor start working? Okay.
No, I mean, obviously, if you were, we'd be respectful of you giving a 2-week notice, or okay. I mean, we obviously would give you time.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you guys for having me. Can I leave these surplus resumes for your other members?
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Thank you very much, guys.
Oh, we thank you. If you could just get those, okay. Thank you very much for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you guys. Have a good evening.
All right, so there's nothing else on the agenda for this evening, so I want
Chairman, if I could just quickly ask,
sure.
just as I did for the tax collector, there were 2 other applicants listed on. Have they bowed out or just not here this evening? Yes.
Let me look at my.
Yes.
Bob? Yeah. We have a question. There's also 2 other people that were in the slots for interviews tonight for the city auditor.
I did not make the arrangements. Ryan did. I don't know what they told him. I simply forwarded all the information to him. And I wasn't asked to make any arrangements. I would have happily, but Ryan made them.
All right, so we'll touch base with Ryan. Maybe next time you guys, maybe next time you and Ryan work a little bit closer together. And
I'd be happy to.
Okay, we appreciate that.
Thanks for being here, though, Bob.
Joe, any other questions from any councilors? No? All right, so I make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Ayes, the ayes have it. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, of course, absolutely. I'll walk you off.
You know, I find it interesting. How would you adapt a rule